So I'm really excited to finally be making this video because I've been looking forward to doing this for so long. I told you guys last week that I was planning a super immersive sim rig build for this week. Basically, I want to 3D print the interior and try to make the sim rig feel as realistic as possible. And I think it's going to be really cool to share that with you guys. This video is going to be a little bit different than my normal videos. Normally, I try to be a little more organized with how I do things. In this one, I'm going to it's going to be raw. It's going to be vlog style. But I think that's necessary for you guys to see the processes and everything. So let me show you guys what the sim rig looks like now and some of the parts and things we're going to be putting on it. As you can see here, I've got a big pile of plastic, just different parts and stuff. And I'll get into a little bit more detail around some of these parts in just a minute. And here is the state of the sim rig right now. You'll notice everything's pretty much gutted, the wheels off. Since last week, I have gone ahead and added the extension. Wanted to make sure that we had the proper angle before starting this project. Now I have test mounted some things. The air duct's already installed and a few mounting points because I did do some mock-ups to try to make this run a little bit smoother. So let me show you guys kind of where this project started and some of the evolution of it so far. So guys, I've only been 3D printing for probably about a month now. When I started, I had no knowledge of 3D printing. I didn't necessarily know much about filaments, and I really didn't know anything about CAD design. If you're not familiar with Blender, this is just kind of a basic box in Blender. I've converted everything to millimeters because that's what you want for printing. But let me share just what a little bit of minimum knowledge of that has turned into. This is essentially, of course, my graphics card on my streaming computer is a little weak, so it's not going to hold up to me zooming out too much. But you can kind of get the idea of where I was going when I started building this and what it turned into. Now, you guys can see the design concept. Let me show you in practice how it turned out. Now, naturally, as I'm sure it is with most people trying to start building an immersive sim rig, I had to start with the button box. This was the first design concept I had for a semi-Porsche-like button box. As you can see, it's a bit bulgy. It's got some very sharp edging to it. Let me get in here and show you. But yeah, you can see very sharp edging. It's not very sleek. The design's not terrible, I guess. Like here, we can stand it up and take a better look at it. It's not terrible, but it wasn't going to look immersive and realistic enough for my sim rig. So that wasn't going to be the button box I went with. Now let me introduce design number 2. This button box, I rounded off the edges, kind of got a smoother look going with it. We got at least a relatively decent carbon fiber look going, and I incorporated what was supposed to be a little DDU type screen above it that I've had on the rig for quite a while. If you guys have seen the videos from before, you'll recognize that screen, except now it's got a nice housing and everything for it to go in. It slid in really good. It looks a little bit sleeker. I mean, a little bit of imperfection here, but that's just mounting tape. So ultimately that was box number 2. Now box number 3 is where I feel like I finally got it right. This is what an actual Porsche 991 button box looks like to some degree. It's got a little bit different button layout. I took a few liberties of changing some things up. I wanted to get some LEDs on a few of the buttons. I've got LED rings in some of them. I do have working bias knobs. Those knobs need to be reprinted because I don't necessarily like the whole colored cap thing. That was kind of something that went wrong. I went with it and decided to see how it would work out if I just ran it through all the prints. And ultimately, I don't like it. I want to just have all the writing in white, but I've got some different filament that I want to use, and that's on its way. And I think that'll look a lot better and a lot cleaner for the knobs anyways. So I'm going to hold off to update those. Now you might notice some of this stuff's already kind of put together, and that's because I wanted to be able to mock it up, and I didn't want it to take too long in this video installing it. So this is my first rendition of the center console, essentially. It's nowhere near realistic enough. It's not big enough. We're going to put it on the rig for now so you guys can kind of see, but that is definitely not the end design. That is just going to be kind of a filler so I can focus on getting the dash finished, getting it exactly how I want it. And then we can move on to reprinting a center console. But let me show you guys the dash, because this is where it's finally starting to come together. This is the center part of the dash, and I feel like this is where designing finally started to come together to some degree for me. Like I started to understand some things in printing, and it just started to click a little bit to where I could start to get something that looked more realistic. One of the tricks of printing this has been with anything on the dash, printing it standing up so I get a consistency in the lines. I don't have any cross lines. Basically had to break it up so it all printed standing, as you can see. The color and everything was really like I was losing it in the light, so I did choose to go ahead and wrap it in this carbon fiber. And as you can see behind it, I've got these mounting brackets just to keep the sides together. Basically, this was the max size I could do for the back plate on my print bed. And I didn't want the seams in this back mount here or in the shroud to be in the same spot as these plates. So basically having it all offset and bolted together helps make this pretty sturdy. I don't have to worry about it falling apart. Now, I'm not quite sure I'm committed to the color. This may change. I haven't decided yet. I'm still going to play with some things on that. But this is kind of where I started with the dash, and it's going to extend over. And this is where I want to start actually installing. All right, so there is really a method to how I've figured out how to install all this. And if I go in a certain order, I think it's going to go pretty smooth and we'll get a good connection. So this is the first part that I want to make sure I install. And this is the air fan, or the air duct that's connected to the fan. And this piece is kind of hard to put in, so I've just kept that in there. It's nice and secure. It snaps in place. And just like the rest of the ductwork back here, everything just kind of pops right together. I'm not going to take the time to bolt this in necessarily yet, but I do want to get that just seated right in there like so that when the time comes to get everything else together, I'm not fighting with that ductwork. So that was kind of the very first thing. Now, the other thing that I've found to be a bit more challenging to line up is over here on the right side, just getting this one little section, and this is literally just a filler that I've created to slide in right over here and finish filling in the rest of the dash. I'm not going to lock it in place yet. I just wanted to get the bolt started so that I'm not trying to find that T-nut in a little bit. Taking this main dash panel, the reason I designed it the way I did, you'll notice this kind of keyhole design to it, is if I had gone any other way with it, it would have been really hard to get off, put on. It's just so that it slips right over the hub connection and just has a very snug, nice fit right over the wheel shaft. And I was very fortunate that, like, even though I've had to make a few adjustments, it pretty much lines up perfect because it can't really move much because of that wheel shaft. All right, so that locked in really nice. The wheel shaft, or the shaft turns smoothly. I don't have any rubbing. It's so close. Like it's very, very close, but that's perfect because when I put the wheel on, you'll see that it kind of hides like the keyhole. It makes it feel more realistic, and I think it just worked out really well designing it that way. Now, this part's a little bit weird, I'm going to be honest. I'm not really committed to whether I want to just go all out and build up into the dash or not, but after I built the rig, after I built this dash, I was noticing a disconnect. And it just had such a sharp cutoff right here. So what I did is I went ahead and made a couple little extensions, essentially, that would allow me to expand the dash up into the screen. And I mean, right now, these just sit on here. As I said, I'm not fully committed to this, but I think the POV video that we're going to get from it is going to make it look a whole lot better. So we'll go ahead and mount this side in real quick. All right, guys, as you can see, I went ahead and heated it up and got some good creasing back in the carbon fiber wrap. It looks a little more similar to what a 992 Cup car would look like. And I want to go ahead and install the button box, but first, I have an add-on that I'm going to put in here. All right, guys, so I've gone ahead and added in the lap timer. And I just used a little bit of mounting tape, and I had this mount that I had made. And it's temporary, so the mounting tape will come right off. I used some clear stuff that holds pretty well, but isn't going to be hard to remove or mess up the build later on. And now that I have that in place, I can go ahead and kind of set the button box. Now the way I'm going to mount this is I've gone ahead and printed kind of my own variation of a Visa mount that gets the mount down low enough, but also does a really good job of holding the box in place. Essentially, I'm just going to take these T-nuts and bolts that I have right here and slip them down in place because I don't really want to go through the process of trying to get that alignment with the bolts when I can so easily slide it on. All right, being that this isn't the end-all be-all center console and it's not gonna last long, I've kind of created some quick mounting options underneath. And I had designed it this way, but then I absolutely did not feel like it looked realistic at all. I'll be able to go ahead and seat this in place, sliding it right under the button box and around the shifter. Some decent alignment. The one thing I will say I'm fairly impressed with is it's actually pretty sturdy, not even bolting it in. Now, one thing I do really like about this design is I'm able to get a good spot to mount my head or to hook my headphones in, so I don't have the cord in a weird spot. So right over here, where you saw me pull my headphone cord through, I do have this little cap here that I've built, and if I pull the headphone through, it just perfectly, hopefully you guys can see that it just perfectly slides in right there. I can take my headphone plug and it's gonna lock in place basically when I plug it in right there and slide everything in together to lock it in place. And there we go. We've got a good solid lock in there and it'll just drop right in. There we go. Gives me a good solid place to have my headphones plugged in without it being in the way. Now a few other little accents that I have, little frame for up here. This was originally intended to be a few extra switches and buttons. Obviously with the rebuild, that's not gonna work out, so I haven't bothered to make an actual button plate or wire anything up yet. Then I've got the shift plate, which just slides in place right there, and everything gets locked in with a little shifter frame. And this actually worked out much better than I anticipated because I can just slide it in place and everything just snaps together. That's not going anywhere. This kind of snaps in place, and then this janky little lid. This is part of what initially I was questioning. First off, the print was terrible, but you know, I knew that this might not be the permanent solution. I wouldn't stick with a gray one. Now, having seen it all gray and black, I'm just not happy with the color option. But even more so, that is a horrible armrest and box cover. So we'll put that kind of in place for now. While I'm over here, I can also go ahead and secure in the button box because now I have no intentions of moving that anytime soon. Now this is where we're at after getting all that installed. You can kind of get a feel for what that POV video is really gonna look like, but we're not done yet because you might notice things are looking a little bit blank on the left side. And I came up with a cool creation for that. Now, obviously, I want the most realistic thing I possibly can to mount my net to. And what I've designed here is essentially my own variation of the quick release you would see on the 992 Cup car. All right, now that that's installed, it's time to take it for a test drive. All right, guys, it's taken a lot of work to get to this point, a lot of trial and error. And I have to say, it looks pretty good overall. I would say the net probably needs to be moved over. I do have plans, like I said, to get that where it needs to be. Definitely a little thrown off. Left side needs a thicker roll bar visible, kind of just cutting down right here. I think that would really help a lot with that view. But overall, for 1 month of 3D printing experience, I'm genuinely feeling pretty good about where this is heading. Like I said, this is just the first version, the first video of a multi-part. I don't know how many parts because I want this to be perfect. I want almost absolute perfection out of this interior. and I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to that. So I'm pretty confident that I will learn and acquire the skills to be able to print it with quality to look as clean and nice as possible, and just be able to create the best mesh I can with it. Now, of course, there's always going to be a little bit of disconnect because trying to run triple monitors, and there's not much I could do about the side screen over here, but I can blend it better, and I know I can make that look better. I can work in some doors and things like that. Like, I have a lot of plans still. I also know, though it's not too obvious to me sitting in here, for you guys, there's a lot of light reflection, and rebuilding the ambient light boxes and cutting out a lot of that reflectiveness is something that's definitely on my list. But all things considered, for, like I said, for the short amount of time and experience, this feels really good and convincing. Like, I could stop here and it would be better than anything I've done previously for sure. But for the sake of creating the almost perfect point of view video and the almost VR feel that I want without having to wear headgear, I'm not gonna stop. I want more out of it. But for the moment, I really do just want to enjoy it because it feels so good. Even the janky little lap timer doesn't look all that bad there. Like, it's definitely not staying, but okay, it's kind of just poked in there. It'll go on the roll bar on the left eventually, based on the fact that I now have a plan for what to do over there. It'll go on the roll bar on the left, but my goodness, so good. So happy with this. Hopefully it looks as good on screen as it does just sitting here admiring it. Oop. But you know, I think ultimately that's enough for today. We've gone as far as we can go. I've bolted everything I have pre-made on it. New filaments will arrive this week, new silks and stuff that'll give it more metallic looks and accents where I need them. It's gonna come together. And I look forward to going through this whole process with you guys. So make sure you guys hit that follow button, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next week. I'm gonna go enjoy this thing.